My 4-year-old daughter pointed at the end of the hallway last Tuesday night and said, "It's still there, Mama." I looked. There was nothing there, but she wouldn't move. She just stood at the entrance to that hallway, arm raised, finger pointing, and she would not walk down it. And the worst part? Her older brother had been saying the exact same thing for 3 weeks. 3 weeks. We hadn't listened to him either.
My name is Davrin. Most people call me Dave. Married to Jessamine. Jess. 2 kids, Callum, 9 years old, and Nora, 4. Harrogate, semi-detached, quiet street. Callum is not a dramatic child. He doesn't make things up. He reads above his age, takes everything seriously, and when he tells you something, it tends to be true. That's the part I keep coming back to. It started in October. Callum at our door. 2 a.m., standing very still at Jess's side of the bed. There's someone standing outside my room. I got up, checked the hallway, checked his room, the bathroom, every door. Nothing. Walked him back, left his lamp on. Next night, same time. They're there again. 3rd night, I asked him, "What does it look like?" He thought about it for a moment. "I can't see it right. It's too dark, but it's tall, and it just stands there." I said, "When you open your door, is it gone?" He looked at me like I'd said something unforgivable. I don't open my door. We put a nightlight in the hallway. That was our solution. A nightlight. Week 2. The nightlight was unplugged, just pulled from the socket, lying on the hallway floor when I came out in the morning. Jess and I looked at each other, looked at Callum. He shook his head before we even asked. I didn't touch it. Nora couldn't reach that socket. I plugged it back in. 3 nights later, unplugged again. This time it was 1.5 feet down the hall from the socket, like it had been deliberately placed there. And Callum's door. We always left it slightly open. He preferred it that way. But some mornings, I'd walk past and find it wider. Not much. Just more open. Enough that something standing in the hallway could look in at a different angle. Then Nora. She'd never mentioned the hallway. Never seemed scared at night, but just noticed she'd stopped walking to the bathroom alone. In the middle of the day, from the living room, she'd stand at the hallway entrance and just not go in. We asked her why. She said, because of the tall man. Jess went pale. We had never used those words. We had never described anything to Nora. She had no framework for what Callum had been seeing, and she described it the same way. Jess found a forum, shared childhood anxiety, sibling reinforcement, children mirroring each other's fears without realizing. It was plausible. We sat them both down at dinner, walked them down the hallway together, kept the lights higher for 4 nights. It seemed to work. Callum stopped coming to our room. Nora started using the bathroom alone. I thought we'd sorted it. I actually believed we'd sorted it. The last Thursday of October, 2:30 a.m. I woke up. Nothing obvious, I just woke up, which I almost never do. Then I heard the footsteps in the hallway. Slow, deliberate, one careful step at a time, coming from the direction of the landing. I waited for the bathroom door. It didn't come. The footsteps stopped, somewhere in the middle of the hallway. Then, 2 minutes of complete silence. I opened our bedroom door. The hallway was empty, but Callum's door was open wider than I'd ever seen it. nearly flush against the wall. I walked to his room, looked in. He was in his bed, asleep, but his face was wrong, tense, like even in sleep, he was braced for something. I stood in his doorway. The night light behind me barely reached the corners, and then I noticed the floor. My shadow on Callum's carpet. Mine. I could see the shape of it. Ordinary, normal, but there was a second shadow beside mine. Tall, with no source. I turned around. The hallway behind me was empty. When I turned back, there was one shadow on the floor. Just mine. I stood very still for a long time. Then I went back to bed and lay there, until morning, with my eyes open, not saying a word to Jess. Because I didn't know how to say it without sounding like my children. 3 days later, police at the house. I'd called them. Not because of the shadow, because of the back gate. The lock had been tampered with from the outside. A bolt lock, interfered with slowly, over time. The kitchen window, ground floor, left side latch, warped at some point, not broken, carefully, methodically done. And 2 streets over, a man had been reported, standing at unusual angles, looking up at upper floor windows, tall, patient. The officer asked if we'd noticed anything unusual. I told him about the night light, about the door, about what my son had been saying for 3 weeks. The officer was quiet for a moment. Then, "Did your son describe height? Build?" I said. "Tall, too dark to see properly." He wrote something down. He didn't tell us not to worry. That's what I remember most. He always would have said something reassuring. He didn't. We moved out within 2 months. New place, 3rd floor. No hallway that leads anywhere unusual. The investigation is still technically open. That's the word they use when they've run out of active leads. What I keep coming back to is this. For 3 weeks, my 9-year-old tried to tell me something was outside his room every night. Every single night. I walked him back to bed, turned his lamp on, and told him nothing was there. He wasn't wrong. He was never wrong. The night before we moved, Callum looked up from packing his books and said quietly, "Dad." It knew we could see it. That's why it stopped coming inside. I didn't know what to say, so I said, "We're moving now. It won't find us." He nodded. Didn't argue. But he looked at me with those 2 serious eyes, and I could tell he wasn't convinced. We've been in the new house 11 months now. Nora doesn't mention the tall man anymore. She's back to being 4, loud, obsessed with horses. But sometimes, at night, she'll stop at the hallway entrance, just for a second, just long enough to look to the left. Then she goes on her way, and I never ask her what she saw, because I already know the answer is the same. It's always been the same, and whatever it was patient enough to wait for an opening. Make sure you don't give it one.